Good morning, Christophe Bourillon.
Good morning, Eric.
CEO of the Professional Yachting Association. Good to meet you finally.
Nice to meet you, absolutely.
It's a pleasure. What a pleasure. What a week we're having here.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Starting high, yeah.
Yeah, no, this has been really interesting. You and I, we've been talking for a while offline, and I've been aware of PYA for a while. So I was looking forward to the opportunity to actually meet you in person. Then yesterday we spent the day in several breakout sessions. We got creative with each other. It was a lot of fun.
It was fun.
We stirred the pot a little bit too, I think.
Yep.
And we're back here again this morning to stir the pot just a little bit more, maybe.
Yeah.
And get some people thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. And pleasure to be here.
Good. It's glad to have you on Yachting USA. And I need to acknowledge and thank METSTRADE, Nas Clarenbeck, and his wonderful team for providing us our studio facilities this year and giving us the hospitality that we can have these conversations as part of the Superyacht Forum and the 2025 METSTRADE here in Amsterdam. So with that said, you're an outsider coming into our little profession. I think that's remarkable. Let's talk about that.
Well, that's a very good way to start it. I came to the yachting industry when I got the job at the PYA 5 years ago. Before that, I spent all my career as an international lobbyist for controversial industries, oil and gas, coal, nuclear. And so I'm seeing and looking at the yachting industry with my experience. And I am seeing things that should get us thinking. I firmly believe that life as we knew it in the yachting industry is gone, is over. Let me explain briefly.
Please, this is interesting.
5 years ago, if you'd asked anyone in the Midwest in the US or in the middle of Canada or France or England or whatever, what is a super yacht? They would have said, well, I think I saw one in a James Bond movie once. That's about it.
Right.
At the PYA, when the media would call us, it would be, the Daily Mail, or it would be, the no comment kind of press. Putin invaded Ukraine, and Western countries decided to seize the assets of oligarchs. That included yachts.
Yeah.
And 4 years ago now, yachts, super yachts landed on the front page of the FT, of CNN, of the BC. And indeed, now, when we get calls from the media at the PYA, it's the BC, it's the FT. You not answer these people.
Right.
That also means that the general public is now aware of super yachts. They know what a super yacht is. And we went from being a discreet industry to becoming a very prominent industry where in Midwest or in the middle of France now, if you are someone, do you know what a super yacht is? They say yes. And we are becoming the symbol of what is wrong with maybe the environment. And we are slowly having an image that we are not controlling, which is not necessarily positive. And I believe we are slowly becoming one of those controversial sectors, like maybe other mainstream controversial sectors. So we collectively, all the sectors of yachting, need to keep that in mind, and we need to slowly build a positive image because of yachting, because it is a great sector to work in.
I sense a similar background here when you talk about yachting in that context, where you've come from nuclear, coal, oil and gas. All of these industries also have huge benefits for our society, but they get these black eyes by media and misconceptions.
Yeah. And, as a lobbyist, what we used to say is perception is reality.
Yeah.
And for instance, of course, the emissions from super yachts are minute compared to the other sectors of the maritime industry. But in the eye of Joe Bloggs in the street, it does not matter. Right. Perception is reality. And we really need to cultivate an image for yachting, and there are good stories to tell.
They are good stories to tell. And part of that good story to tell is the fact that the economic impact of yachting is so big. It's one of the few industries where everything is still hand built, and it requires thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of man hours to build. And every place a yacht goes, it brings economic prosperity and commerce and revenue. And it's a gift that keeps on giving. And our profession, our industry, needs to do a better job of communicating that reality. It is real that there is a upside to these big boats plying the oceans and coming to port and hiring all the people they hire and doing everything that happens around the wonderful world of yachting.
You've put your finger yet again on a very good point. I believe that my job and our job at the PYA is to have a foot in the industry and a foot in the outside world. One of our jobs is to be also an early warning system for the industry of what may come their way in terms of regulation and all that. That is why we spend a lot of our time talking to policymakers, to maritime authorities and all that. And every single time we tell them that, the superyacht industry brings a lot of economic benefits into the world, they tell me, Christophe, it's very well, but give me the data. And one of the jobs we collectively, again, need to do is to gather data on the number of people who work in the industry, the number of people taking trainings, the investment in cities, in economies and all that. And that will also help us convince the general public that, yes, we are a very serious and big industry to be considered.
And a lot of that data is collected. I know the Marine Industries Association of South Florida, along with the United States Superyacht Association and the International Superyacht Society, these organizations have been collecting this data along with others. And collectively, we have to do a good job now of combining this and finding the outlets where we can publish this or make this better known, because that also then attracts what we need, which is new blood into our profession. We need to get the young people from the Midwest part of the United States, or from the middle of France, or the middle of Netherlands actually has it figured out pretty well. But, Poland or Spain or, South Africa, would be places where there are opportunities for coming into this profession and finding a career path.
Yeah. And before getting into talents, just to finish off on data, I have a dream.
All right.
60 years ago, BP started to publish annually their own statistics on oil production, refining, and stuff like that. They're starting over time gathering data from other companies. Now there is something that is called the BP Statistical Review, which is published every year, which is the Bible for oil and gas data for everybody, from journalists to policymakers and all that. It is a very valid, serious publication. And my dream is that in 20 years' time, we will have a yachting statistical review, which will play the same role.
Perhaps PYA could be a driver of this.
It's bigger than us. It's bigger than the PYA because we only represent crew. However, the good news, the PYA is one of the founding members of the Superyacht Alliance, whose job is to have around the same table the various sectors of the yachting industry. And the Superyacht Alliance might be well suited to actually be the gatherer of all this data.
Right.
But you just said something on, yes, we would love people from the Midwest or, the middle of France or whatever, coming out of school or university thinking, well, should I go work for Google or Apple or whatever, or Volkswagen? And I would love them to think as well, or the superyacht industry. Because we need to attract talent. We also need to attract talent from outside the industry. We're an industry where, people start getting a job on a boat, and after a few seasons, they get a job on shore. I firmly believe that we need to also attract talent from outside the industry. When I was working in oil and gas, my boss came from British Airways. And it's very healthy to have different, people coming from different backgrounds. Absolutely. And we are an industry. I call it an industry when I talk to policymakers, but we both know that we are different sectors. We're not just here. We're professionals, not yet an industry. But we also are an industry where the last one where you can get a little bit of an adventure.
Yes.
We are an industry where everybody I meet, and it's the only industry where I'm seeing this, where people are still passionate. Everybody I meet in yachting is passionate, and that we need to cultivate and maintain. We must not become an industry where people are just getting a job.
No, I agree. I've seen that my entire 40 years career in the yachting profession is that people are here dominantly because they're passionate about it, whether they started as a young person sailing a boat and finding a love for the sea and then finding their first job that has them, like mine, contributing to the industry by building equipment and participating at that level, or they go and become crew and enter the profession that way and grow up through, a crew-based type of career. Either way, it's two different paths to the same place.
Absolutely.
And in the same place is a passionate group of people sustaining, like the Superyacht Forum. I doubt that there's a single person here in Amsterdam today that's not passionate about why they're here.
Well, we've seen it in the conversations yesterday in the breakout sessions. Absolutely.
Yes.
And it's fantastic. It's fantastic. It's fantastic. So we need to find a way to maintain that, really.
Right.
But unfortunately, yesterday I was speaking to an Italian captain, one of those, he's fairly young, he's in his 40s, but, he's passionate about his job. And he's telling me that, he's starting to see new colleagues coming in for whom it's a job. And as we've discussed, working on the boat is not just a job. The boats are getting bigger. Actually, we need to talk about captains because I really believe it's, and especially, when talking about welfare, we're talking about welfare of crew, but a number of captains come to me and say, how about the welfare of the captain? How about my mental health? And they cannot talk about it publicly because they fear they would lose their job. So it's not an easy one to crack, but yacht captains today are CEOs. They are HR manager. They are welfare manager, they are communication manager, they are crisis manager. 2 months ago at the PYA, I got a call from a captain who was driving back to the boat, and he said, PYA, one of my crew members just died. What do I do? How do I manage the crisis? What do I say to whom? And unfortunately, we will be discussing training, but in mainstream industries, any business unit manager every 3 years has leadership training, crisis communication training, and I do believe that the time has come for our senior crew to have trainings and skills in more than just handling the boat.
No question about it, because handling the boat represents 5% of what the captain does. And to what you just said, I'm way too aware of some of the issues that are unfortunately besetting people in this role. And there was a captain in South Florida just about 5 months ago with a beautiful family who committed suicide off the boat, and completely unexpected, but it just hit his limits. And, I talk about that in this podcast because I think it's important that the human factor is brought into these conversations. You can't ignore that. And it is critically important, I believe, with the young people that are in our profession, that we pay attention to their mental health, their well-being in the context of what they do day to day, because it's a tough assignment. And not just on the boats, but I think when you look at the role that crew have on the boats, the one thing that they have that most of us don't have is they have their obligations to remain on the boat 24/7. It's just no second shift. It continues. And until you get to some point where you can pause or stop, get to a port. And that's when some of the real drama happens, the decompression and the alcohol and the drugs and the everything else that kind of flows into that, off-gassing of stress.
Yeah. I mean, if there is no crew, there is no boat. If there is no working crew, there is no boat. To have a working crew, you need a happy crew. If you don't have a happy crew, you have no boat. And that's why, indeed, the mental health and the welfare of crew is paramount. I said earlier that working on a yacht is one of the latest place where you can still get a bit of an adventure. But I'm not forgetting that working on the boat is not easy. I got my head bitten off once for saying what I'm about to say again, but I will insist on it.
Please.
Not everyone is made to work on a yacht. I could not work on a yacht. I couldn't take that kind of pressure. I can take some other type of pressure. Working on, all the crew I've met are fantastic, but they are not anyone. You get a special kind of people. You need to have skills. You need to be a Swiss knife.
Yeah.
And they are very valuable people. They need assistance all along their career. They need training. And what drives me mad again in this industry is we are talking about basic standards and basic and minimum standards.
Minimum standards.
That is annoying me so much. Working on the boat should require crew to learn every day. On-board training is very important. Time to do drills is extremely important. Hours of rest is extremely important.
Yeah.
And there is a lot of work that we need collectively, again, to do to ensure that we have a properly working, happy crew.
So let me ask you, Christophe, is this a bottom-up solution or a top-down solution?
That is a great question, mon ami. I believe, Rick, it's got to be a bit of both.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. As a lobbyist for other industries, I spent my life pushing regulation. There was too much regulation. I came into yachting, and as we discussed, the minimum requirements and standards are so weak that we do need, I don't want to call it regulation because regulation comes from the regulator. We are in a fantastic position where collectively the industry, we can write our own standards. And if they are good enough, the regulator will adopt them. And to answer your question, I think we need both a bottom-up approach where, we listen to crew, we provide them what is needed to make them work properly. And a lot of that is happening. I mean, I've seen so many yachts where in the crew mess, there was a little sign that said, no Wi-Fi, talk to each other. I mean, it's very important to build crew cohesion. So it needs to both be bottom-up, but also a top-down approach where the higher instances of the industry get together and try to harness and write up basic standards and best practices. We all need this collectively.
We do. I take it even a step further in that while we are looking at new technologies that are coming into our industry, while we're looking at ways that we're creating and utilizing space on these yachts, there is an opportunity, I believe, that exists to start looking fresh at the crew spaces, get beyond the minimum requirements, minimum P, that's established. What is it, 3 square meters or something like that? It's just, it's silly. And I'll dare say, maybe take back a little bit of the real estate that we give to the owners of these magnificent vessels. They've got a lot of balconies and beach club areas and wonderful spaces that, I've watched over the last decade or so be reinvented and recreated in these boats and start giving a little more real estate to the people that 24/7 live, work, and operate and are part of this operation.
We need to step back to the future. There is and I think we need to learn again. That comes back to what I was saying earlier. Let's not just look at ourselves. Let's look at what is done elsewhere. And I use the aviation sector quite regularly because this is a sector that I know. You know what? First, there were boats. When aviations were invented, when airplanes were invented, they copied, the certification of aircraft and the training of pilots, what was modeled on what was done in the maritime sector. Except that I truly believe that aviation kept evolving,
yes,
whereas maritime got stuck in the Middle Age in some instances. For instance, pilots certify airplanes. Airplanes are built nowadays to have rest areas for crews.
That's right.
In the tails, everywhere on the airplane. Captains and crew are the last person they will ask for their views in the design of a boat. And that is wrong.
Yeah.
I say when I talk to policymakers that I believe that another thing we have in this industry compared to others is capacity to invest. And our owners can spend money on research and development. And I truly believe that yachting has the potential to do for the maritime sector what Formula One did for automobiles, where inventions for Formula Ones landed in your car and my car.
That's right.
But, innovation, the boats are beautiful. That's where we have the innovation. But we also need to innovate in the way we operate the boats. We need to give crew the real role they play. A yacht captain told me not long ago, pardon my French, bloody hell, Christophe.
Your French is quite eloquent.
Thank you. They changed the software on the bridge, and now to activate the windscreen wipers, I need to go to, 4 drop-down menus. Well, that is wrong.
That's silly.
That is wrong. The captain must be put back into the driving seat with regards to designing bridges and stuff like that.
Yeah.
We're talking about the paperless bridge. That may have some incidences on safety as well.
Right. What happens when all of a sudden electronics go down? You don't have paper charts.
You know what? I have a
dead record.
Yeah.
Can get you dead.
I have a little story to tell you about that. I live in Cannes and I'm part of the Cannes Lifeboat. And twice during the Cannes Yachting Festival, we were called out at sea to, tow an electric boat that came in from Barcelona, and that, all the systems shut down and the boat was dead in the water. So, it's very well to have these kind of technologies, but you need to think about, when the thing hits the fan, you need to have redundancy and not rely on one source of power, for instance.
Well, I like this because this is kind of like we were talking bottom up a little bit, where if you have crew or captains involved in the design, they're going to look at things like you said, like the bridge, the helm, how that's configured. They're going to look at the living spaces. They're going to look at the way crew move from one part of the boat to the other. How they're, for instance, I've watched some beautiful aesthetics in the naval architecture, and then I've looked at these windows and I looked at these hull sides and I thought, that's great, but how will the crew ever clean it? And then you see the crew going out on trapezes and hanging, from harnesses and putting themselves in ridiculous locations to try to keep the vessel up. And that is simply not really anticipating what the crew has to do in the context of keeping that boat seaworthy and shipshape.
Yeah. You see, again, we need, I don't like the word revolution, even though I'm French. We need evolution in the culture at every level. An airplane, a car is made to be functional, then made to be beautiful. A boat is made primarily, I believe, to look beautiful without enough consideration to the functionality, the operation of the boat. As you rightly said, lovely and huge window surfaces, well, in terms of seaworthiness might be an issue as well, but in terms of maintenance could create problems. And there are too many photos that come our way of crew hanging out trapezes without enough safety or basic safety equipment and stuff like that. And again, onboard training and onboard safety is yet another layer and another issue where we collectively need to improve.
Well, and you look at crew training, and for those that know me know that I come from the industry of manufacturing, and I was manufacturing some of the most dangerous type of equipment used on yachts. I was building cranes, tender garage cranes and deck cranes, lifeboat launching, rescue boat launching cranes, to overhead beam cranes, and then gangways, passerelles. All of this has human connection, human intervention. None of this is trained on your STCW. You don't get the hands-on training, nor do you get much anchor training. Some of the most dangerous activities that happen on these yachts is on-the-job training. And who's overseeing that, and who's facilitating it, who's certifying it, who's authorizing it. And I was looking at a pie chart yesterday in one of the breakout sessions, and they were showing the byproducts of some of these events that happen. And 25% of these crew injuries happen from, and fatalities happen from anchoring and tender launching operations. So again, as an industry, we have to look at what we're doing with the basic certification, which we call basic, right? Just the very minimum standards. There should be a good, better, best scale here. And then the renewal of certifications or ongoing training, which right now, as I understand, it's mostly left to the owners to say, okay, I'll pay for part of my crew to go and update this or get additional training, or I won't.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things. We really need there a culture revolution, basic training, mandatory requirements are so, would you fly if you heard the captain said, hello, ladies and gentlemen, welcome on my flight. I'm Captain Christophe Bourillon, and I've been trained to the basic requirement to fly this airplane. You'd get out of a bloody airplane faster than you can say it. So the same must happen in our industry. And another thing that drives me a little mad is that, quite a lot of owners of superyachts are CEOs, very successful CEOs of companies who spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on recruiting the best candidates for their companies. And the way the recruitment and the way the investment on their crew is done is mind-boggling because, the yacht crew is responsible for the safety of all on board, including the owner. If something happens, she will be liable. I would be an owner. It's a no-brainer. I would give my crew time and money to continuous improvement is a buzzword in the industry, in mainstream industries. It should be so in yachting as well. Right. Culture revolution there. We really need to give our crew as much training as they want and wish.
Well, let's educate the people listening to this conversation about PYA, Professional Yachting Association. Your tagline is supporting professional yacht crew. And I think that's so fundamental. Talk a little bit about your role integrating and working with crew and the resources you bring to crew, please.
Well, the PYA was set up about 34 years ago by a number of captains who realized, rightly so, that driving a yacht was not the same as driving a sea merchant ship or a grey navy ship. Right. And so they developed, training and certification specific to yachts. As a subsequent to that, the PYA was mandated by the MCA to validate sea time and certify sea time for yacht crew working under the MCA system. But over time, our role has evolved into trying to lobby, for lack of a better word, everybody we can to raise standards and assist crew with training, professional advancements. So we organize webinars on any topic, any subject. But one of the best service, I believe, that we offer, we have, the PYA. We never hear about good boats, just like, you never talk about trains that arrive on time. We only talk about trains that arrive late. It's the same with the PYA. When crew contact us, it's when there are issues and problems. And we have a member assistance service where we have, a bunch of experienced seafarers who offer assistance on anything from contractual to salaries to whatever. We call it a member assistance service, of course, we rely on membership fees for us to operate. But when a crew calls us, we don't ask them, are you a PYA member? And if you're not, we're not going to help you. So we help and assist everybody that comes our way. That's good. And every year, and every individual crew that comes to us, we help them. Every year, our member assistance service team deals with probably 600 individual cases. Whereas, I know of, there are some other organizations who will only lawyer up if it can benefit boats and if, they have a, relevant chance of success. At the PYA, and anybody who knocks on the door, we assist. And there is one thing I would love to say as well. We get quite a number of people that come to us after having been bullied, harassed, abused. Yeah. I have seen crew, I've seen the bruises, and every single time I advise crew to press charges, to go to the police, and I would accompany them and assist them. Every single time they decline that because they don't want it to harm their career. And I don't know if we need a Me Too movement of harassment and bullying in yachting, but We need something.
I've had too many interviews myself with crew where whether it's the NDAs they've signed, and I have two very well-established, well-known maritime attorneys that I've interviewed and I'm very good friends with, who've both told me those NDAs are basically not worth the paper they're printed on, but they're an intimidation factor.
Absolutely.
The crew are worried that if they rock the boat, they're not going to get the endorsement from the captain. They're not going to get the goodwill, and that's going to hurt their chances to come to the next boat. And I'm going to tell you right now, we're in a profession where we don't have nearly enough crew. We've got 600 plus yachts over 35 meters in production. We got another 200 in contract. 800 plus of these boats are going to be hitting the ocean in the next 3 years, and that number is only going to increase. We don't have to worry about whether or not you have job security.
Yeah.
Leave the boat, press the charges. I was speaking to a young woman this morning who, as a chef on a boat, she's left because of these very issues. And the concern was the same thing.
Yeah.
Will I get a good referral? Can I work again? We got to stop that. And there needs to be some way we can help with that. I'm not sure what it looks like yet, but I think it's important that we start thinking about how we can provide crew that platform, that ability to say, I'm out.
Yeah, I have a suggestion.
You're wrong.
Yeah, I have a suggestion. Aviation, the pilot, the captain was God, used to be God.
Yeah.
And there are a number of planes that went down because God was wrong.
Right.
They started the air aviation industry developing what is called cockpit resource management, where they taught the two, pilot and co-pilot, to work together. It was extended to crew resource management, where now crews are taught to operate together as a team. And I believe that in our industry, in addition to individual certification, training, and skills, there should be a place for teamwork, team building, teaching them to work as a team and a crew, learning from each other's job. That would alleviate quite a lot of the issues. And whenever a senior officer comes into the PYA office, I always ask them, what are the 3 skills or things you don't have which you would love? And all of them mention leadership training. Leadership is important in making a crew operate as a good crew.
Right.
Yesterday, I met a fantastic Captain Carsten, and he told me, Christophe, I just came back from Los Angeles, where I took acting classes and training lessons and whatever. I said, Carsten, do you want to leave the industry? He said, no, not at all. But these acting classes taught me so much about me, how I speak, how I convey a message. And in terms of my job as a yacht captain, this was very beneficial. This was a fantastic thinking outside of the box. I would never have thought about that.
I love it.
But there are solutions out there. We've got, and of course, we discuss trains that arrive late, so we discuss problems, but there are so many solutions. Crew resource management training, leadership training, right, for all, because, a stewardess or a deckhand today will hopefully move up the ranks, and leadership training is good for everybody, even if you're just the leader of your own job.
So this might be something that the industry training agencies that are, providing the training for the STCWs and the NG1s and all of that can look at this and say, we need to add more to the portfolio and create the opportunity to bring crew back in and back in.
Yeah.
And this is, I think it's critical, because leaders are not necessarily naturally born.
Exactly.
They're created.
Absolutely.
And, good leadership comes from good training and good experiences.
Absolutely. Now, it's going to take 30 years to make STCW evolve. And again, bottom up and top down from the industry. Again, we are in a fantastic position where we can ourselves collectively write up the guidelines. And, the guest program under IME, which is basically offering training that are not mandatory, but that are so precious. Guest is probably the place where we could develop, these additional training, crew resource training that we are discussing. But it's up to us, actors of the industry, stakeholders, to make it happen. And what I found really pleasing yesterday at the forum which we both attended is that there is consensus on many of the issues that were raised yesterday.
Yes.
So to me, that was a very positive.
But there's also, interesting enough, there's also this reluctance to be the first one to voice the dissent or identify the shortcomings. It's human nature to a certain extent. And it was a little bit liberating. It's a beautiful thing to hear a couple voices speak up yesterday and call a spade a spade.
Yes.
And basically identify some shortcomings we have and potentially offer then some solutions to improve that.
And again, learning from my past experience in other industries, at some point I worked for an advanced biofuel company, and I would go to policymakers and politicians and governments, and I said, you should develop biofuels. And they would say, what does big car and big oil think? So I would go to, Shell or another company and say, how about biofuels? And they would say to me, well, Christophe will, produce biofuels when the cars will be able to take the biofuel. So I would go to a big car, Volkswagen, for instance, and say, when are you going to put biofuel cars on the street? Well, when the big oil guys, will produce the thing. So basically, we got both of them around the same table and to make it happen. And I absolutely agree with you. I do believe, again, that I think that you will be speaking with Joey Min and Hein Velema from the Superyacht Alliance.
We're going to keep this conversation going.
Yes, the Superyacht Alliance, to me, is a fantastic venture in the sense that I often compare it to the United Nations of yachting. What is the UN itself is not the police. They don't have necessarily power, but what they have is they get different parties around the same table. And the Superyacht Alliance is an association where yacht builders, brokers, ICOMIA, PYA representing crew, we all sit around the same table and we can discuss, issues that we have from each other. And the Superyacht Alliance, I believe, can be that place where we will hopefully bring solutions. But I absolutely agree with you. It's no use having all the recruitment agencies sitting around the same table. That's very important, but we need the different sectors of the industry coming together. That is paramount.
And let me say this too, because I come from a sector of the industry, manufacturing and supply, part of the supply chain. And I'm confident in this evaluation that not enough people that are supplying and participating in the large yacht industry understand the critical path that we have with crew welfare. You can't ignore that to the context of I'm just focusing on my own business and all of that doesn't matter to my business, because ultimately it matters a lot to your business. You don't see it, you don't touch it. Maybe you've never been on a, in fact, most probably have never been on a yacht. They supply yachts, but they've never actually gone to sea on a yacht. They don't know what that is. But I use this statistic to try to kind of put things in perspective. There are arguably about 500,000, 500,000 high net worth individuals in the world that could own a yacht, have the financial wherewithal to, but only about 5,000 of those actually do own a yacht. Think about that. That ratio is tiny. So if you start disenfranchising any of these 5,000 and they hit the effort button and get out, you've just taken a percentage of new boat construction off the table. You've taken a percentage of new equipment manufacturing contracts off the table. You've taken the revenue stream from these vessels attending ports and facilities and refits off the table. And that will affect your business.
Absolutely.
So you do have an interest and a dependency upon the well-being and welfare of crew, and you should pay attention to that.
Absolutely.
And where you have the opportunity to invest in supporting organizations like PYA and others that are looking out and trying to help the welfare of crew, I would say that would be a great use of whatever resources you might be able to bring to the table.
Absolutely. Every company in the yachting industry should start opening up extending their radar screen, anticipating, looking forward, again, like in any other industries. And indeed, if you are an equipment manufacturer, you should start thinking about the industry globally.
Yeah.
Crew are important to you. And again, yeah, this is a culture step up that we all collectively need to do.
It is. I agree. So, Christophe, for the benefit of both the association and crew and those listening to this, how do you become a member of PYA? And what would be the message to those listening and supporting PYA?
Well, we have a website. One thing that I didn't mention, I mean, the PYA, we do whatever we can to assist crew. And we've developed services just because. And one of the important one is we accompany crew in the development of their career. We advise them on the routes for their COCs, for the various trainings and all that.
Yeah.
So that's something that has been happening because as we've discussed, we need a lot more qualified crew for the many more boats that will be built. And the PYA is the entry point for anyone who wants to work in yachting and in the progression of their career. So log on to the website, call me, become a member, support us, and we will support you. So basically, help us help you.
Right. Do you know what percentage of crew that are working in the industry right now are members of PYA?
Well, we have roughly 10,000 members, that is active members and non-active members. In fact, the business model of the PYA right now is we are paid by crew a membership fee of 185 euros per year to verify their sea time. But as we discussed, sea time verification has become, not a small part of our job, but we've developed so many more services for crew that I personally believe that they get good value for money. But I would say that, wouldn't I?
Yeah, you should say that. What about the crew placement agencies? Do they have involvement in PYA? Do they have an interest or a vested interest in what you do?
That's a very good question. The Professional Yachting Association, we represent crew. But what we do, the services and what we've done over time, in fact, is benefiting way more than crew. It's benefiting crew placement agencies, training agencies, and all that. For instance, one of the work we did a while back in France is we were contacted by crew placement agencies, in the Med, not just the French Med,
right?
Because there are some who are bona fide, who are MLC compliant. And this is, again, an industry where anyone can set up a crew placement or a yacht management company without having the requirements, the skills, or the certifications to do that. So with the authorities, we did a bit of cleaning up with regards to crew placement agencies. So we are doing activities that benefit, various sectors of the industry, training, crew placement, and all.
Okay, because, I think all of this comes together with some congruency. There's been conversations as well. You mentioned earlier that perhaps not everybody's well-suited to be crew. A good dear friend of mine who's a captain uses the term that not everybody gets to be an astronaut. You can be in aviation, you can even be in rocket sciencery, but not everybody gets to go to space.
Absolutely.
Do you see a day where we are going to do a better job of crew placement and vetting and personality evaluations and identifying particularly the personalities that tend to bring problems to the table?
Yeah.
Is that possible, or is that a pipe dream?
No, of course we'll get there. But again, we need changes in the industry. Again, did you know of any industry where you would get a job through WhatsApp or through Facebook? And, I don't have the statistics, but when we have people contacting us at the PYA with problems, we ask them questions and we ask them, how did you get this job? And the number of people who got a job on Facebook and all that is mind-boggling. Work with the bona fide recruitment agency, placement agency. We all know who they are. And indeed, over time, the industry is slowly evolving. I'm hearing that in terms of management, I'm starting to hear about the 360. where, in the old days, the boss would assess the people below. But again, in other industries, it's also the people below that assess the boss.
That's right.
And doing the 360 is also going to be a very healthy thing for our industry to do at every level of the industry, be it on the boat or out on the boat or on shore.
Right.
And it comes again with the working as a team, learning to work as a team.
I like that. That's essential.
And, I should say that I have a personal experience. I have been the CEO of various organizations. It took me a while to let go. But again, I took personally a number of leadership courses and training where one of the best lessons I learned was, Christophe, if you ask somebody to do something, if you get 80% of what you asked, be happy. Because between what I think, between what I say, between what you hear, and between what you understand, there are 3 steps where we can get it wrong. And at the PYA, I let my team do their thing. My job is to sort out the problems. I'm a fixer, and ask my team, whatever there is, come to me, but not too late that the problem cannot be fixed. Give me 3 solutions. I will pick the one, and I'm responsible for it. And I've got a very good team, in fact. And usually they come to me and they say, Christophe, we have this problem. This is what we did, and it's fixed. It took me a long time to let go.
Well, you know what? Your communication analogy is so spot on. It's one of the reasons why I only do these conversations in person, because any other way, it doesn't really work. You don't get enough of the real communication through.
95% of communication is non-verbal.
That's right.
It's the attitude, it's our face, the way we look. 95% of communication is the non-verbal.
That's right.
Even a newspaper article can be misinterpreted. There is nothing better than face-to-face interaction, be it in an interview or on a yacht. On board.
That's right.
Absolutely.
That's right. That's why that smile at the top of the gangway when you're coming on board sets the tone for the whole experience.
Absolutely.
And that's where we give our love and our appreciation to the crew, because they're the ones that makes the passion when you come on board these boats.
Yeah.
They're the ones that make that owner and his guest or her guest feel special and helps them disengage from their regular real world and re-engage into their love for the ocean, love for yachting.
Yeah.
And I think we started this conversation about that whole thing.
Yeah.
We need to have a change in perception of yachting.
Yes.
And we need to have people understand where the love comes from, and that this is a passionate industry.
Yeah. And indeed, crew are those who make it happen. And crew needs to be valued way more than they are today.
Yes. And, Christophe, that's what I'm looking forward to as this week continues. As you mentioned, the Super Yacht Alliance is having their voice here. We're bringing these voices out on Yachting USA, and Yachting International Radio is going to be a big, if you will, underwriter of these conversations. They will continue perpetually. I think it's one of the most important things we're doing as a communication platform is to bring these voices out.
Yeah.
And I have to thank you very much for bringing your voice to the table. What a pleasure it's been these last 2 days to get to know you and have these conversations, because we've had some conversations off the record that was also very remarkable.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I would like to say that, Yachting USA, Yachting International Radio, RIA, you guys play a crucial role in making everything we discussed happen, because, you are the media.
Yeah.
And you are more than a media. And I've seen Yachting International Radio evolve, and you definitely have views, opinions, and it's fantastic. And we need also to help you reach out, not only to the yachting community, but also outside of yachting.
Yes.
You are a very important instrument to make everything we discussed happen. So thank you to you guys.
Thank you, Christophe. What a wonderful way to end a beautiful conversation.
Pleasure.
Merci beaucoup.
Thanks, mate.
My pleasure. And until next time, I'm out of here.
If your brand belongs in the heart of the yachting world, this is where it happens. Yachting International Radio reaches over 1 million yachting professionals and enthusiasts every month, with 77 million impressions, 220,000 social followers, and 74,000 podcast subscribers. Our hosts are insiders, crew, captains, CEOs, trusted voices shaping the industry. This is targeted, high-impact advertising in a luxury niche. Visit yachtinginternationalradio.com/advertise. Your audience is already listening.